This is Chapter 12 of Drumlin Fever. Its title is Return from Battle. Kevin and Bart left the scene of their ghostly triumph quietly, continuing in their retreat the tactics of their advance, wiggling through the long grasses, taking shelter behind trees, making elaborate signals to each other with whistles and sticks held up. What before was deadly serious was now celebrated in a kind of dance. If you can do a dance on your belly wiggling along, tickled by earthly things, not till they reached the line of trees that marked the road allowance did they make any sound. Then, with modified whoops, lest an enemy hear their ears be sharp, they entered the second stage of their triumph. They did mock battle with each other. Kevin wrestled traditionally, Bart with the techniques and shouts of judo. Finally exhausted, they sat down in the circle their joust had cleared. Bart was the first to speak. "Commander?" "Yes, Recce. MI07 has deserted us. He must be punished." "Oh, Brian, I forgot about him. He must have gone ahead to the culvert. He is a deserter. We will shoot him, so." Bart's store of Second World War comic opera Germans became apparent. He began to caper, giving Nazi salutes and trying to click the heels of his rubber boots. "Recce, come to order. We must not mock our comrade in arms. He may be at this moment suffering at the hands of the enemy." "Very good, sir. Shall we have a rescue party?" Bart had suddenly become an English officer and was screwing up one eye as with a monocle. "At once," said Kevin, getting up. Not waiting for Bart, who was sputtering words like India and Pukka, he stared down the road. Bart ran after him. "Do you think he might be in trouble?" Bart was serious and anxious at once. "Might be. He's not too good at combat. Thinks too much," said Kevin. "We'll find him, even if Bumworthy's got him. Bumworthy, you're not worth a bun." Kevin stopped suddenly. "Look," he said, looked. There, emerging from the culvert ditch, was a bedraggled Brian, holding a stone in one hand and a stick in the other, his eyes frightened behind his glasses. He scrambled up the road and looked behind him. "Hey, Brian!" yelled Kevin. "Hey, Kev, where are you?" "They nearly got me," Brian called back and began to stagger along the road. The two warriors ran down to meet him, and Kevin forgot his reserve so much as to hug his brother, while Bart danced around and cartwheeled. "Our spy escapes the wicked enemy. He foils his foes. With his meagre stone and wand of willow, he has wrecked them, everyone." "Okay, Recce," said the commander. "Pay attention. MI-107, now give us report. MI-107, you may be seated." Brian looked round for something to sit on. He chose a boulder in the hedge, and the others squatted down beside him. In spite of his experience, he was still miraculously free of his asthma. "It's like this. I lost you guys and figured out you'd gone the way you agreed. Where were you anyway?" "We caught a party of the enemy in the field and drove them. Tell you later. So I went along the river back to the field. They've made a terrible mess there, torn down the apple orchard and most of the woods, holes in rocks and building blocks, all over the place. I sat in the tree and watched. Old Bumworthy came along with some guy from the Bumworthy called Daddy, a red-haired bastard." Kevin recoiled in fury. Bart said, "You shall shoot him, hang him upside down." Kevin turned in irritation. "Go on, Brian." "One reason they have so many holes is that they can't get any water. Funny, because old Putnam has had lots of water on a pond too. Anyway, the guy from Toronto had some big news for Bumworthy from his boss, but I missed it. How come?" "Nearly fell out of the tree. Had to come down anyway, and the city guy grabbed me. So I yelled at Bumworthy that Daddy would get him, and he turned white and I got away. Too bad you didn't hear. They may be plotting to do something to Daddy. Funny about the water, too." But Bart intoned, Water, water, ain't it where it oughter? Okay, Bart, let's go. Time to go home for lunch. The three moved off in silent procession up the hill, the brothers going ahead together quietly, Bart behind them, jumping and Jack acting, to his heart's content. It had been a fine morning's work. One enemy defeated, and another intelligence man back unscathed. When they drew opposite the toy village, Kevin had just finished telling Brian how they had driven off the enemy crew. Then he paused, remembering yesterday. Recce? Yes, Commander. Take MI-07 home to the mess. Tell the mess sergeant I'll be along presently. I'm going to take a last look from the next field to see the enemy's dispensations. Oh, well, come intelligence. Luncheon. And the two went out of sight. Kevin slipped over the side of the road and down to the pond. His mind was not at all on the day's events, but on what he had done, and remotely what happened last night. He gathered some moss and began to clean up, mopping the wet spots in the village, setting the dolls on their feet, and rubbing the surface of anything it defaced. The smell was bad, but not as bad as the smell he remembered from last night. Then he recalled that smell had been his own. He squatted down at the end of his labors and thought about it. It was impossible to believe that it was a dream. Perhaps that business at the end had been a dream, when he had seen the family of strange creatures in the lake shore. But the cave of ice, his furry skin, the rush of water, and mud, the smell, these were as real to him now as they had been the night before. Yet how could it have been real? He slapped his knee. Of course, the proof. Brian had been there, and Brian had been immune from dampness and immune from his allergies today. Yet Brian hadn't said anything about it. Come to think of it, since that wild awakening when he thought that Brian had drowned this morning, he'd not thought about it himself, nor mentioned it to Brian. He'd ask him, first chance he got. This is the end of Chapter 12, Drumlin Fever.